Welcome back everyone to another Kenshi video. Right now it's day 113 and our gang is currently picking up after the aftermath of countless Shek raids. Bad Guy City video by video has been becoming the coolest spot in the game, and catastrophes led by our hero B01 has become a strong faction with 30 or so gangsters in it. The little base has now become a huge town, and at this point with its own bar and economy, there's a lot of different citizens walking around, they're all buying the swords and the planks that we're picking up from the bandits and the Sheks. But still somehow, even though our town is thriving, we're really struggling with making money. I've also been grabbing a bunch of books for research whenever I can, but we're kind of at the point now where I need to start raiding some labs and ruins in order to get the research that we need. So once our main party was ready, I began by sending them to the Great Fortress. It looked like another icon was on it, so I wanted to make sure the Sheks didn't take it over again. But as we were on our way, this large group of 40 to 50 Shek bandits, they just come jogging by, and I'm like, I wonder where they're going, like, maybe we should follow them for a bit. And yeah, sure enough, they're trying to attack Bad Guy City. Who could have fucking guessed? So the top G's fought the Shek bandits at the gate of Bad Guy City and made sure that none of them would make it inside. Had it just been the 10 or so people that we were going to leave at Bad Guy City, this could have been a very fierce raid. But the top G's are super strong now, so they were able to knock down all of the Sheks in just about a few in-game minutes. Before we left, I realized I had some ancient science books and some engineering research still, so I transferred them from Kat's backpack and into our research bench, and then I selected a few more technologies to research and unlock. Mainly, I wanted robotics and more advanced weapon smithing. We'll need both, as if we can start to make our own high-quality limbs and our own high-quality weapons, that'll be really good, and we'll get way stronger and make a lot of money. After I finished selecting the research, I had some characters go one by one to each of the Sheks from the raid at our gates and pick up all of our weapons, that way we could sell them. If you haven't seen the previous few episodes, I feel bad for you because they were really good, but this is how we've been making a lot of money in these episodes. These bandit attacks are really helping us stay afloat, as we wouldn't be able to pay for all this food if it wasn't for all the Shek raids. Every one of them brings a weapon that's worth about 1,000 to 3,000 cats on average. So after we filled up our inventories with the weapons, the top G's were off. First, they'd be going to a way station, that way they could sell all the weapons they picked up, and then grab some food. After they were finished at a way station, they would then go check out the Great Fortress to make sure no Sheks were back there squatting or something. After getting close enough, I could see that the city was still in our control, and the Sheks hadn't returned, so that was really good. This meant the top G's could go on their adventure. The goal is currently to try and travel south. B01 and his group have only explored like 15% of the map in all reality, so there's a lot of places to still go and check out. The main goal at hand right now is going to be to get near the Fishman Island. But there's going to be a lot of stuff in between us along the way, such as all of these broken ass ruins and labs. I kept on finding these and they're all like empty or destroyed, so that's really shitty. Now when the gang were traveling pretty early into their adventure, they came across a berserker village. The berserkers being one of the many Shek bandit groups who constantly harass B01 and his gang. At first sight, this place just looks depressing. Every single building here, it has no roof. We're all just rubble, like waiting to collapse or fall over. And they got like some of the silliest shit going on. I mean, they have a gate sitting out front, but there's like no walls around it. I mean, like, I have never seen such a shitty base before. Like, there aren't even lights here. Even camps, like normal camps that bandits set up, those have lights. So I figured we'd at least have a respect to use the gate, since they must have kept it for some reason. And surprisingly, the berserkers didn't go berserk. I mean, they weren't doing anything. I thought just as soon as we entered, they'd try to attack us or something. We had to go into the big house of rubble and go up to the berserker leader and start a battle with him. The rest of the gang swarms in and the fight begins. The room is so tight and there's so many people inside, like everybody could barely move. But this was kind of to our advantage because the berserkers would quickly become victims to all of our attacks and fall unconscious. There were some nice weapons, and the leader of berserkers named Ghost, he has a 10k cat bounty on his head, and we can turn that in at either the Shek Kingdom or the Holy Nation. Now the Shek Kingdom, there are enemies, so we won't be able to bring him there, but we can bring him up to the Holy Nation. Only problem is that we're gonna kinda need to send someone who is by default a normal human male with no prosthetic limbs. Any other race, gender, or skeleton will have an awful time in the Holy Nation. So Cat put Ghost on his shoulders and began his journey of heading to the closest Holy Nation city in order to turn in the bounty. Meanwhile, the top G's were going to hang out at the Berserker base for a while until the Berserkers all died. If we just left them there knocked out, they might get up and continue living, so we must ensure that everyone here is dead. We would do this by letting Chompy go from corpse to corpse and eat the Berserkers alive, as if they got eaten, then there's no fucking way that they can revive themselves or continue being bandits. And in the morning, some bone dogs would even show up and then help Chompy eat the knocked out Berserkers. Cat was able to run through the swamp and make it into near the hub, where he stopped at a bar to buy some food. That's when he ran through an entire camp of dust bandits. This almost resulted in him being attacked, but the dust bandits were too slow to keep up with him. And my favorite part was just as Cat was running away, there was a bunch of slave traders who just wandered in and began to fight the dust bandits. Likely, that group of dust bandits are going to become slaves by the end of that day. Cat just kept on running. He doesn't care. I mean, he could have taken on both groups by himself. He had easily twice to 3 times the levels of skills of everyone there, but the Dust Bandits will just have to suffer, as that's how karma is going to play its course. By day 115 and at 16 o'clock, Cat was approaching the Holy Nation city. He took a look at the guards that were there, and they had really low stats compared to him. He's certain there's some higher ranking guards, but it seems to just be the average farmer in disguise as paladins. Cat would run into the main police building for the Holy Nation and talk to the High Inquisitor Seta in order to hand in the bounty. At first, Seta tries to hint at us to give him the bounty as a gift for Okran, but no way, man, fuck that. We came here for money. Alright, we aren't followers of Okran, which he acknowledges and scolds us for, and then he gives us 10k cats. Sweet, Cat now had his cats and he could look around the city, but it seemed pretty simple. I mean, there's some shops and a temple, a few residential locations, but he knew he had to make his way back to Bad Guy City. Meanwhile, with most of the Berserkers dead, the top Gs decided it was time to continue their adventure, heading towards the Fishman Islands. Of course, the gang's still looking out for any ruins and places of interest to check out, but they're currently still in the Shek's territory. They're coming up towards the Empire's territory, and there's a lot of different enemies to look out for, from bandits to skin spiders. The gang's gonna need to constantly stop to take care of some foes before healing up and then going back on their adventure. Eventually, they cross paths with some Shek guards who had the advantage of being on the upper end of a hill. The two groups would collide, and slowly more and more Shek guards would fall down one by one until the gangsters stood victorious. This was a pretty severe battle, and everybody was feeling the damage from it. So after we healed up, I took a minute to look at all the weapons that the guards were carrying. There's no way I was going to be passing up all this free money, so I spent a few minutes just looting all the weapons, putting all the swords and whatnot into our inventories. By the morning time, the gangsters were back on their way to the Fishman Islands, but still, they kept finding more and more Shek guards. It didn't help either. They got really close to a nearby small Shek outpost, which instantly rang the alarms and set whatever few Sheks that were there after us. I mean, this outpost had a bunch of broken buildings as well, but at least it had walls with a gate, so that's way more impressive than the Berserkers had, I'll give them that. But there didn't seem to be too many people around here, so the gangsters just tried to go on by. They kept on getting stopped by all these random groups of Sheks and guards, which isn't much of a problem, it's just more of an annoyance, as constantly, just back to back, we were having to stop in order to fight all of these bastards. Meanwhile, back at Bad Guy City, the 10 gangsters that were there were receiving bandit raid after bandit raid back to back within about an hour to each other. Luckily, there are all the citizens and travelers who'd fight the bandits as well, which would make most of these battles much easier. Without all the citizens we have there, Bad Guy City would probably be screwed. Luckily, the top G started to make some progress into the south and near the border of a crater. There's a lot more wildlife out here than there are bandits and whatnot, which is a nice change of pace, but once entering the crater, we could see the other end of what it's like being in Kenshi. One of the first things I saw was a bunch of wild swamp raptors fighting a few beak things. I thought the beak things would have won. I mean, the Beak thing was hitting a bunch of them at a time, taking down quite a few, but still, the raptors were able to overwhelm and take down the beast. There's a lot of different animals and monsters around here, so the gangsters need to be very careful. And it wouldn't take too long until they quickly realized how bad the situation was when they'd come across their first few Beak things, which wasn't that bad. But then going forward, there's a few more to fight. We could see that the crater is just filled with these beasts, making it a very dangerous area to travel through. The only other groups that we could see were high-level tech hunters and different high-level warriors, and of course they'd be able to hold their own against the Beak things. This was definitely a dangerous area of a game to be exploring in, but the group couldn't help themselves. They needed to get forward and get down to the south, so the group would just continue exploring the crater. They kept on finding a lot more broken and destroyed ruins, which was really shitty. We really need to find one that's intact, that way we can get some books and some AI cores for research. The group eventually would come across a group of slave hunters who were looking for some victims to beat up and enslave. They quickly had half of their group killed by our group, leaving them just to heal up. We didn't kill the rest of them because it was just satisfying knowing that these slave hunters watched as their friends died, and then we walked away without a single care for them. Not even worth the money or enslaving, you know? Meanwhile, the entirety of Bad Guy City was knocked out. It turns out they were being attacked by some bandits, and then some Shek guards also came over. It was really up to poor Cat, who just got back home. He was left all alone, everybody else was knocked out. He couldn't survive the assault either though, and he would be knocked out as well. Luckily, still the Shek guards would leave Bad Guy City after knocking out everyone, but it proved to Cat he needed to get a lot stronger if he wants to become a top lieutenant of the catastrophes. But finally, the gangsters would arrive at a town called Clownsteady. It's a small town to the south of the map where they'd be able to sell off all the random weapons they've been gathering over the span of this episode. Along with that, they'd be able to restock their food and get everybody to heal in beds before they head out for their next journey. While everyone was there healing up, I got Cat over at Bad Guy City to grab everyone and throw them into beds. They'll heal much faster if we got them in beds, and we also now have like 2 people that are missing legs, which isn't good. I also didn't grab them legs in this episode, of course, so hopefully in time, or eventually I'll end up remembering it, or it bothers me enough so I have to get them. Once he got a bunch of people into beds, he himself lied down and began to recover from the deep wounds that they sustained from the Shek attack. Once he was doing a bit better, Cat would make his way over to the local way station and then buy some food for Bad Guy City. Meanwhile, the top G's were now busy running through the south, and then they found some wild swamp frogs. It was sad. I really don't like fighting the swamp frogs because they're cool as hell, but since these ones were feral, they didn't really give us a choice. Now the gang were over to a local market that was on the way to the Fishman Island because it seemed like a good idea. They could probably stop and get some new equipment since they had a lot of money on hand. Maybe grab a few drinks, get a rice bowl or something, you know. But once they arrived at the market, something seemed fishy and off. First off, there was a bunch of people in cages, so I mean, wasn't born yesterday, I know these are slaves. Second, there weren't many stores there as well. You know, there's like just a bar and some random stalls. And while that happened, Cat arrived at a way station, so I switched to him quick and I went to go buy some food, but there was no food at the way station, so I needed to send Cat all the way to the swamp in order to buy some food, since he can't go into Shek cities. After all, I think he was the person who started the whole war between the catastrophes and the Sheks to begin with. But when he was leaving the way station, somebody that doesn't like B01 and his gang noticed that they were there, which caused all of the slave traders to become hostile towards the group. The top G's had no choice but to walk into a trap, basically. Disguised as a normal city, the gangsters now had to fight every slave trader in this market and attempt to take down the faction. While there are a lot of slave traders, B01 and his gang are very strong now. Beep was knocking out people left and right, throwing wacky ass hits at them. There's even some times where Beep was one-hitting people now, which is phenomenal. Inside of a bar, there was all these drifters, and they weren't hostile, it was just the slave traders and anyone who was affiliated with them. Thankfully, none of the Garus were affiliated with the slave traders, or else we would have had to flee the area. Those things are worse than a Beak thing, man. Those things are power. By 11 o'clock, they had knocked out a bunch of slave traders, but then the Traders Guild got involved as well. I mean, fuck them. If they think it's okay to fight with us, they're not worth being cool with anyways. I don't give a shit. Well, so now we're enemies with the slave traders and the Traders Guild. Isn't that great? The gang would go into each building, making sure to clear them out and eliminate any enemies or guards that weren't already bleeding or dying. The market was in complete anarchy, with all of the slave traders falling to their wounds and bleeding out. There are more and more people starting to run into the place, including some martial arts masters. This meant the top G's had taken down the slave market. With some guards still alive, the gangsters would be hanging out for a bit just to look for loot, heal up, and make sure that they could kill as many guards as possible. And Toro would go into one of the slave shops, and she noticed a bunch of slaves just sitting there in cages. So one by one she started to lockpick their shackles and cages in order to set them free. I mean, what other way to take down the slave market but by freeing a bunch of random slaves? Not everyone would leave though. I mean, there's some people that were so scared of punishment they stayed in their cages even after we had eliminated all of the guards and lockpicked their cage and shackles. But after freeing every slave that we could at the building, the gang went to the middle of a market and started to do the same there with all of the slaves outside in cages. By the end of the night, we had freed every single slave in the market, making the stock price of them probably skyrocket. Like, if anything, this wasn't a really thought out plan because of the butterfly effect. The price of slaves is going to go up because there's less slaves now and there isn't a slave market. People are just going to be working extra hard at slaving, you know, it just means more people will be enslaved, but you know, that's alright. In the Kenshi reality, the slave markets are no more, and dozens of random drifters will be able to drift on out of a market. Hopefully they'll find freedom or safety, you know? This is kind of like when you let a bird go out of your window and you just hope it knows how to fly. Before leaving, some of the slave traders had high levels, so I decided to grab a bunch of weapons, and most of the weapons that I did grab were worth about 3,000 to 4,000 cats each, which will basically pay for food for the entire trip. The gangsters would run out of a market being followed by a man named Urson. They freed him, and since he was still following them, B01 offered him a spot in the gang. Urson has no stats, all level 1, and he's as weak as possible, but that's alright. I mean, we'll be able to bring him to the Fishman Islands with us to get strong. Meanwhile, poor Ribbit, he was still stuck inside of a building at the slave market. He couldn't get out, which was terrifying, and we couldn't just leave him either. If this ever happens to you, just run up close to the character and then pick them up with another character. Usually you'll be able to get them out of a spot or the wall that they're stuck in and then put them back down on normal ground. The gang would continue to head east and then would find a hidden village in the mountains. When going to the gates of it, the gang realized this was home to those martial arts warriors we had seen earlier at the slave markets. They have different places to train here and whatnot, and it's pretty nice. I mean, there's a bar, there's some beds. This place is added in from a mod, of course, that's in my mod list in the description below. You can train martial arts here, and I'm pretty sure there's more to discover, but we have a mission at hand. Skipping the healing, which hopefully doesn't put the group at risk in the future, they head closer and closer towards the Fishman Islands, with the goal of finding and killing the king of fishmen, as well as possibly kidnapping some fishmen to add to the gang. The group spent a lot of time and energy to get this close, but they could finally see the island over the horizon. I hope you guys all enjoyed this Kenshi video. If you did, remember to leave a like and subscribe. I want to start releasing these once a week on Sundays, so get ready. Every Sunday we're going to have a full-length Kenshi Gangs episode going up for hopefully the next few months and going on from that. Make sure you check out my Discord server or other social medias if you want to interact with me or my community. And anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.